We've got our first real Nick Chubb injury update of the offseason. Had to put on my Nick Chubb jersey for it. So we're going to look and see what Andrew Berry said to some media members when speaking at the NFL owners meeting. And we'll talk about when a realistic timeline for Chubb to return is. But quick plug here to subscribe to the channel, because as we get more updates, we're going to get them straight to you as soon as possible. So make sure you are subscribed. That way, when more injury news comes out over the next few weeks and months, you are not in the dark. Plus, we go live every Tuesday, which we're going to be doing later on today. So come hang out with us 5 p.m. Eastern. I guarantee you're going to have a great time. Now let's get right into what Andrew Berry had to say today about Nick Chubb's progress, saying, honestly, it's probably too early to really understand what he's going to look like at the start of the season. He's truly doing a fantastic job with the rehab, and he should start to load run probably sometime this upcoming month. Right now, he's strengthening his quad, he's doing the rehab and everything, but it's not like he's going out and done sprints, agility drills, stuff like that. But this month, we expect that he will. The next, call it 3 months, will be pretty telling in terms of his potential readiness for early in the season. We're going to be conservative in terms of our approach in our assessment with building the roster because he's coming off a major knee injury. But I do have to give him a lot of credit. He's done a really, really nice job, but I think we'll have a better sense. Don't hold me to it, but I think probably if you ask me that question around the draft, I may have maybe a little bit more of a specific answer. Across the board, this is just really positive news in my opinion, right? He may not be sprinting just yet, but for him to be ramping up and getting to that stage, that definitely puts him on a good track to maybe not be a shoe-in to be ready for week 1, but hopefully it's closer to week 1 than say like week 10 or sometime around November when he suffered or underwent his second surgery, right? You look at the Nick Chubb timeline here, I think everyone is getting really attached to that September 18th, and naturally as sports fans, we go like, all right, you tore your ACL on, say, October 1st, 11, 12-month recovery, you should be ready to roll no later than next October 1st. But that's not really how it works. It's more about when the surgery happens, which in this case was September 30th. Unfortunately, Chubb had to get a second surgery in November to repair his ACL as well. So really the clock started ticking November 14th. And that's a much more accurate date to target when it comes to 11 to 12 months from November 14th. That would be October 14th to November 14th of this season. But based on what Andrew Berry just said, I mean, I'm not going to put a gun to his head, but he definitely sounded like a guy that was optimistic that it could be closer to NFL Week 1 compared to what October 14th to November 14th is usually in that Week 6 to Week 9, Week 10-ish range. So I'm very encouraged by what Andrew Berry said today. Now, he did have that one little part talking about being conservative in our approach, and they have not been very aggressive in the running back market. When you look at the running back room, the most notable name, I would say, was the addition of D'Onta Foreman. Now, Nyheim Hines, I think, was added because of special teams. And we'll talk about that in our second video of the day when we go live later in the channel. But the NFL just approved a rule change to dramatically change kick returns to benefit return players, and that's Nyheim Hines' role. So I think we're seeing Nyheim Hines get signed more for a special teams job than a running back job. And so if that's his primary spot, well, then you look at the running back room, and it's Jerome Ford, D'Onta Foreman, and then Pierre Strong Jr. and John Kelly are battling for that third spot, with the other guy probably being a practice squad player. But that does not rule out the Browns from going into the draft and trying to find a third back to complement Ford and Foreman until Chubb returns. But I feel like if the Browns were very queasy about Chubb returning much later in the season compared to earlier, they would have been a little bit more aggressive in the running back market. Now, the question is, what will Nick Chubb look like, right? And ultimately, I don't have the clear-cut answer. I don't think anyone outside of Nick Chubb, his doctor, and Andrew Berry and Stefanski, probably 5, 6, 7 people on this entire earth have a good idea of what Nick Chubb will look like. But if we go off history, which we'll look at in a moment, there are some good signs and some not so good signs of what to expect from a player coming off a multiple torn knee ligament injury. But I do want to throw it to our, well, not our resident doctor, but like our football resident doctor, Dr. David Chow, who caught up with Chase Sr. back at the Super Bowl radio row, so 2 months ago at this point, and they talked about Nick Chubb. And I want to remind you guys about what Dr. Chow had to say.
Nick Chubb, just a gruesome injury early in the 2023 season against the Pittsburgh Steelers, and one of those where you see a defender come down low on the leg, his knee goes a direction that it shouldn't, but a lot of people expecting that to potentially be a career-ending injury. Then they do the procedure, the surgery, and there's hope that he's going to be able to come back. Do you see it that way as well? And can Nick Chubb be a similar player that he was? Because he, like Joel Embiid, has had to undergo a couple of knee surgeries as well.
I hope he can come back. Look, I'm sure your followers do some fantasy. I drafted Nick Chubb. Okay, look, love Nick Chubb, but you can't unsee that injury. The reports came out afterwards that it was an MCL injury isolated. I'm like, no, that's a knee dislocation with the entire medial side of your knee disrupted. They since said he's had a second surgery with ACL. That is a knee dislocation injury. That is very, very significant. I will say this. If Nick Chubb wasn't Nick Chubb, he'd be out of the league. Because Nick Chubb is Nick Chubb, he has a chance, and I hope it happens, to come back. Not week one, maybe late season, maybe next season, to be a pretty darn good player, and I hope that happens, and I hope he exceeds expectations. But I think it would be asking a lot to say that he will be Nick Chubb again. He still can be a very good player, but he was elite of elite, and that's a high bar from a knee dislocation. I would say his knee injury is worse than what you think back to J.K. Dobbins a couple years ago with his knee. He wasn't right the next season that he came back. It took him to the second half of the season. He wasn't right. Now, of course, the Achilles is a different issue, but this is a higher hill than even J.K. Dobbins, so let's hope he can do it.
So once again, thank you to Dr. Chow for giving us time back in February to talk about Nick Chubb, but that was February. Now we are in March, so we've got some new updates and whatnot. But overall, I agree with Dr. Chow that Nick Chubb is just a different athlete. And maybe for other players, that could be a slight career-ending injury given his age and given it's his second, major knee injury of his career. But if there is going to be someone to be an exception, it would be Batman. Now, if we look at previous running backs that came back from ACL tears, and keep in mind, Chubb did not just tear his ACL or damage it, whatever they are officially calling it. He also tore his meniscus and his MCL, like Adrian Peterson and Jamal Charles, two superstar backs that I would say Nick Chubb was, is in their tier of running backs. Peterson obviously probably being in his own tier, but they're all three great running backs that were just built differently, and you can see that after they tore their ACL, they were able to come back without skipping a beat. But I'm not sold on that being the best comp for what to expect out of Chubb. I think you should look at guys that tore multiple knee ligaments. We saw this with Javonte Williams in October of 2022. He was ready to roll for training camp day one of 2023. So about a 10-month recovery, but you can see Javonte Williams, who was much younger than Nick Chubb, did not play well. There's just no way around it in his first season back from tearing multiple knee ligaments. J.K. Dobbins and Gus Edwards, they came back from very severe knee injuries. Dobbins had to get a second surgery. He came back a little bit too soon. Like, they had some good moments, but I think production-wise, you're not seeing a very high yardage total. The average definitely, piques my curiosity, but I think that's just a testament to they weren't able to get a whole lot of carries because they weren't ready for that big of a workload in their first year back from tearing multiple knee ligaments. So I want to say Nick Chubb is the exception. He's in a different tier of Javonte Williams and Gus Edwards and J.K. Dobbins, just from a physical standpoint, right? I mean, Nick Chubb every single spring goes back to Georgia and he posts a new video of him deadlifting and squatting 1,000 pounds. So if there is someone that can really kick this rehab's ass and get back to 100% sooner than other players, it would be Nick Chubb. I mean, for starters, he's done it before, right? You go back to his time at Georgia. He suffered a major knee injury in 2015 for the Bulldogs at Neyland Stadium against the Vols. And the next year, he posts 1,100 yards, 5 yards a carry, and 224 carries. So a pretty intense workload 1 season removed from, or 1 year later from suffering a similar major knee injury. So I want to say that Nick Chubb is not going to be in the same bucket of the Dobbins and Williams and the Edwards of the world. And he's probably going to be a little bit closer to how the way Adrian Peterson and Jamal Charles bounced back, although their knee injury was not as severe. So for that reason, I think Chubb's kind of in the middle, and I think it's likely a 2-year recovery. Whereas I don't think you're going to see vintage Nick Chubb in 2024, but I still think that we may see that towards the end as he kind of gets further and further removed from his injury. And maybe if the Browns are able to find a way to bring him back for 2025 on a 1-year deal, because I'm sure he'd be inclined to try and stay with Cleveland, especially if the Browns are able to go on a deep postseason run in 2024. I want to be optimistic that I think 2025 is a much better target date for, despite Chubb being a year older at that point, us getting the Nick Chubb we all know, love, and remember. Not saying he's going to be washed in 2024, but I would just tap the brakes. Not pump the brakes, just a little tap on Nick Chubb's going to be his usual self in 2024. That, to me, seems a little bit ambitious. But then again, if there's a guy to prove me wrong, it would be Nicholas Jamal Chubb. So with that being said, what's your favorite Nick Chubb highlight/moment? Let me know in the comment section. I want to end the video with some good vibes and high spirits here. So get down below and let me know what your favorite Nick Chubb highlight or moment is. All right, let's wrap up the show by bringing on producer Trizzy Trace to pick a card. By the way, I feel like I'm kind of overdue for explaining pick a card. I haven't done it in a little while. It's just a fun way to end each video in the off season when things can get a little bit dry at times, and I feel like just ending the video with a random pick a card is just a good reminder that, like, sports are supposed to be fun. So you should have fun watching these videos. And there is nothing more fun than, like, winning at the roulette table.
Absolutely.
Or just picking a random card correctly.
The rush you get when you get the card right.
You go around the rest of the day. Like, I just walked past a
Peek.
stranger, and they have no idea I got the card right.
No.
Like, what a fool.
I
They
know.
should be asking for my autograph today. All right, which card do you want to go with?
I'm going to go with the 4 of hearts.
4 of hearts?
Because Nick Chubb has a 4 in his number, and he's got a lot of heart.
I like it. For that reason, I'll go with the 2 of hearts.
I love it.
Right? I like the logic you had there.
I love it.
All right, here we go. Oh, one more shuffle. Nick Chubb does not give a shit about ours. 10 of clubs. 10 of clubs. All right. That will do it for us on this report. Remember, we're going to be live in a few short hours for a live edition of the show. So come hang out with us, 5 p.m. Eastern, 4 p.m. Central.